Santa Clarita Advisory Committee Hometown Hero Awards. You know, it's amazing. I went back and I started looking at what we do. And we talked about this all the way back in 2008 as building a special recognition program. And if you look at it, we have certain things here in Santa Clarita that go every year. You have Man and Woman of the Year, and they pick someone every year. You have the top 51, and they try to get someone every year. But we decided that it shouldn't be a yearly thing. We shouldn't have to search for somebody. People were going to come out and do something that we thought was amazing. And at that time in 2008, we were kind of under siege. And we then ended up with a gentleman who went to the city council and supported us, which was kind of refreshing from our standpoint. And he stepped down in 2008. He was appointed to take Cameron Smythe's place, and he committed that he wouldn't run as an incumbent, and he honored his commitment and stepped down. And so we gave him a Canyon Country Hometown Hero Award at the recognition meeting when he stepped down. Just shortly after that, our liaison, our long-term liaison, Dave Peterson, who had really helped us quite a bit and was the kind of individual that understood when he came here, everybody didn't talk city speak. We weren't cheerleaders. At the same time, he was very good to us. He recognized what we needed to do. And so in August of 2008, we also, when he left community preservation and went to planning, we made him a hero as well. And then it went on for 2 years. We didn't necessarily see anybody that we thought was of that caliber. And if you remember in 2010, Diane Troutman had served on the Planning Commission for 2 terms. She was nominated by Marcia McLean. And in that 2000 nomination, in that 2000 election, she supported someone that Marcia didn't particularly think was the right person to support. So she was taken down off of the Planning Commission. And we thought, you know, you are one of those individuals that looked into things, that researched things, that seemed to have the best interests of our community involved, and so we nominated her as well. And then, as you know, as this story goes on, when Tim Ben Boydson was elected in 2012, he put her back on the Planning Commission. So 2010 was the last time that we actually did this for anybody. It was interesting to look back at all of the past records and realize since then, nothing had happened that stood out in our minds to warrant that kind of recognition. So I just want to give you a little bit of background into what this is and why we did it. Santa Clarita has a manufactured home rental adjustment ordinance. And I know I didn't realize it. I'm sure that a lot of people didn't realize that Santa Clarita has 16 manufactured home parks. And in those home parks, there's just under 2,000 spaces. So it's a pretty large group of people. And when the council was looking at this at the time that they did this, around the 1990 timeframe, they realized, and they put it in their ordinance. It sat right in their ordinance, and that's what it's up there. What it says, a significant number of the owners are older, and many of whom lived on a fixed income, and a significant number are of low income. Those persons may expend a substantial portion of their income on rent and may not be able to afford other housing in the city. And because of that, because manufactured homes really aren't super mobile, they can't relocate readily. If someone says, okay, I'm going to raise your rents, it's not like it's in an RV, you just go to the different RV park, that it creates a disparity between the bargaining power of the people that live in mobile home parks or manufactured home parks and the people that own manufactured home parks. So the city took it upon themselves in 1990 to look at the challenge of implementing an ordinance and set up a set of procedures that would in fact protect the homeowners from excessive and arbitrary rent increases, because up until that time, well, it was just a total free market environment, and the park owners could raise the rents at any amount that they wanted. But while at the same time, because of state law, they had to make sure that the manufactured home park owners were able to get a fair rate of return on their investment. And that's, I think, part of the fairness, part of the balance of balancing the charge that you charge for something versus the fact that certainly you're in business and you wanted to establish a fair balance and make sure that people stay in business and make sure the customers can stay customers. So it provided a framework for the justification of rent increases, and they established a 5-member panel to decide on resident appeals. So if a mobile home park owner said, I'm going to raise the rent X amount, and the residents thought it was an excessive amount, they had a place to appeal. And that board had a couple of members that were elected by the park residents, a couple that were elected by the owners, and then one that was elected by the panel. So the major issues with the existing ordinance and the way it was is that the current ordinance up until last night said that you could raise the rents per the consumer price index, but even if the consumer price index didn't go up, you could raise it a minimum of 3%. And it said a maximum of 6%, and going back quite a number of years, you'll see that it never went over 6%, but many times it went under 3%. And then the park owner could just arbitrarily say, I want 3%. So a lot of the park residents felt that was unfair because, you know, they're living on fixed incomes, they're not getting increases because the CPI is low, the Social Security is going up minuscule amounts, and here they just see these arbitrary increases. Also, one of the disturbing things, especially that I thought about from this initial ordinance, is that it had in it the terms, there was no right of city council appeal. So if something happened in the process that wasn't right, if the 5-member board appeal process failed, the residents were told, you go hire an attorney and you can litigate if you feel that the increase was arbitrary or unjust, or if the process was flawed. And from my standpoint, I think that was totally the wrong approach, because if the city council passes an ordinance, I believe the city council then has the ultimate responsibility to adjudicate that ordinance. That they have the ultimate responsibility of making sure that the ordinance is complied with. That's their job. And to turn around and say, oh, well, those guys made a decision, so I'm not going to even discuss it, created the situation that we were in. So Mr. Fraser and Mr. Henry have been advocating for changes to this ordinance for over almost 3 years. I actually went back and saw that in January of 2013 was the first time that Mr. Fraser came to County Country Advisory Committee and talk about what was going to go happen. And you know what? When they went to City Council, the City Council refused to discuss the issue. They said, look at the ordinance. There's no right of council appeal. We'll turn to our attorney. And of course, you know what that means. And the attorney says, oh, that's right. You can't talk about it because of the way the ordinance was. And so the residents were told, you know, and Mr. Fraser and Mr. Henry were told, hey, look, just go away. We know, we've heard about it. We know all about this. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Just don't bother us anymore, right? And they came to us, and we talked to them, and we said, if you want to enact change, you got to stay in their face. You got to continue to go back, and you got to continue to keep this in front of them as much as you can. And you know what? That's really true. I mean, there's been times when we've been promised things as the advisory committee, and we've been told, oh, it's going to happen in 3 months. We're still waiting for the ordinance changes for existing homes in existing neighborhoods. Never happened. Okay, and that's probably our own fault because we didn't stay in their face. But Mr. Fraser and Mr. Henry did. They kept coming back, time after time after time, going in front of the council and saying, we need something to change. And they were told many times, go away. We already heard you. Don't come back. We know what's going on. But they didn't listen, and they came back time after time until, in fact, something did change. So that was a part of the issue. And then there's questions that arose, and we'll talk about those a little later, about the availability of translation services, of whether or not, Mr. Fraser, who is a representative of the park residents, says, I'm going to go bring, or we're going to have X number of people show up here, and they're not English speakers. So we need translation services. And I was at the meeting too, where the city says to them, no, you can't do that. You have to have those people call us, the individuals that needs the service, and ask for the translation service. But they don't speak English. So it was a dichotomy. And I thought it was unfair. And I'm hoping that in the future we find a better way to offer translation services to our non-English speaking residents. And for that matter, when I've looked at it, I've thought about it also. We don't have a lot of there in this community is also a fair amount of hearing impaired individuals in the community, right? And they don't participate in the council meetings very much, probably because they can't hear it. But there is no services for them either. So it goes beyond this, but it points out that we need to be inclusive for the individuals that that we live with. So on March the 31st, it went even farther when 6 residents were refused the ability to address an appropriate subcommittee. Subcommittee was a subcommittee on that dealt with ordinance changes. Bob Keller just arbitrarily said, nope, you know what, I'm adjourning the meeting, and he leaves. And he said, well, wait a minute, what about these guys that still want to talk? And 6 of them were not allowed to do so. And it just brought up the fact that we needed something to happen. So they never gave up. And that's the important thing for all of us to remember. It's something that we should think about a lot, is to never give up. And so the new ordinance, for the highlights of the new ordinance, is that in this change, it allows the park owners to raise the rents once yearly. Seems reasonable. And it increases the by right to increases by right are tied to the actual CPI now. So if the CPI is 0 or below 0, their rent increase is 0. And then they set a maximum at 5%. And that's a by right increase, the one that doesn't have to be justified. But the park owners, to be fair to the park owners, they were also given the ability to increase for capital expenses and for maintenance. But they had to accompany it with a cost justification and show that that cost justification still was within an amount that gave them a fair rate of return. And that determination of a fair rate of return is approved by the 5-member rent panel. So there was a considerable amount of good things that occurred. Unfortunately, language requiring residents to litigate was toned down but not eliminated. So here what you have is a discussion about people that have a disparity in their ability to negotiate because of their economic status. And so in one case, the city wanted to help them eliminate that problem with home park owners and just left it as is with the city itself. But still, that's a great amount of change. And if it wasn't for these 2 guys, it never would have happened. So Mr. Fraser and Mr. Henry, would you come on up? We would like to present you with this award. Maybe we should have called this the Never Give Up Award. But Doug and Ray, I want to thank you very much for your valiant effort over the last 3 years. And if you'd like to say something, that's fine also. But it certainly says something about your character, both of you, and your ability to go after something for your residents and for your friends and neighbors. Thank you. Let's give these guys a few.
Okay. Well, I like a challenge, and this was a big one. But when I moved into the manufactured home that I'm in 10 years ago, our park owners got greedy and tried to get an $80 rent increase, and we appealed it. This was in 2007. So this is what got the ball rolling. And if it wasn't for the neighbors of mine and the participation of members in Sand Canyon and Park Lane and other communities, this still wouldn't have happened, because me and Ray were fighting by ourselves, and when we got others involved in it, then the city even started listening more, because they realized it was a big fight, not just between us and them. But thank my neighbors, thank everybody that listened and helped us all along the way, and thank you for the plaque.
That's going to be tough to surpass, but my name is Ray Henry, and as Doug's mentioned, it was just an effort. When I started this, I was very much out of the picture until someone who's actually began before me and my community gave up. Apparently this person was suppressed and somewhat scared into leaving what I continued. And in that matter, the neighbors began knocking on my door and said, "You're the guy with the biggest speaking ability," which I'm not. We need your help. Fortunately, at that time, I've said, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. And it wasn't easy. The city have literally pushed us out, personally me, with a kind of a neglect and just literally not saying, hey, get out of my place, but pretty much just, yeah, yes, we'll help you, we'll call you back, and a lot of those times never received a phone call. This community have helped us tremendously. There's plenty of people here who have seen and speaking on our behalf and supporting us. Mr. Furman here has been just an incredible help to the community. He has visited us as well, given us advice, talked to the community, talked to the neighbors, and also a good mentor. I thank you so much, and again, I'm sorry if I didn't speak very properly, and thank you for this plaque. Thank you so much, sir.
All right.